She ran from the stars and landed in his backyard. Jaden lived alone in a small house near the woods. He didn't like cities. They were too loud, too fast. Out here, he could hear the wind move through the trees and the birds singing in the morning. He worked from home, fixing computers and building small robots as a hobby. It wasn't an exciting life, but it was peaceful. That all changed one night. It was almost midnight. Jaden sat on his couch, sipping warm tea and watching an old sci-fi movie. Outside, thunder rolled and rain hit the windows hard. The sky flashed with strange blue lightning. Jaden raised an eyebrow. That didn't look normal. Suddenly, a loud boom shook the ground. The lights in the house flickered. Jaden stood up quickly. What the heck was that? He rushed to the window and looked out toward the woods behind his house. For a moment, everything was dark. Then he saw it, blue smoke rising from the trees. Something had crashed. Jaden grabbed his flashlight, pulled on his jacket, and ran outside. The rain was cold, the wind strong. His boots sank into the wet ground as he followed the smoke. The air smelled like fire and something strange, like burned metal mixed with flowers. As he reached the edge of the trees, he saw broken branches and glowing pieces of silver spread across the grass. His heart pounded. This wasn't a plane crash. This was something else. Then he heard a sound, a soft voice, like a whisper. "Please, help me." Jaden turned toward the shed behind his house. He walked carefully, his flashlight shaking in his hand. He opened the shed door slowly and gasped. A woman was sitting on the floor, holding her side. But she wasn't like any woman Jaden had ever seen. Her skin was pale with a soft blue glow. Her hair was silver, flowing like liquid light down her back. She wore a long white gown, torn and burned at the bottom. Her eyes were bright violet, wide with fear. She looked at Jaden, breathing heavily. "Don't let them find me," she whispered, and then she fainted. Jaden stood frozen for a moment. His mind screamed, "This isn't real." But the woman lying on the shed floor was very real. She was hurt. Cold rain was falling on her through the broken roof. He picked her up gently. Her skin was warm, almost like soft sunlight. She didn't weigh much. As he carried her into the house, he looked up at the sky and saw strange lights moving above the clouds. Fast, silent, not from Earth. Inside, he placed her on the couch and covered her with a blanket. Her hands were glowing slightly, but the light was fading. She looked peaceful now, asleep, but not safe. Jaden sat down beside her. "What are you?" he whispered. Suddenly, something buzzed outside. He ran to the window again. 3 small black drones hovered in the distance, scanning the forest. They were not normal drones. They made no sound. They moved like animals, fast and smart. One of them stopped and turned toward Jaden's house. It blinked red, once, twice, then flew away. Jaden's chest tightened. Whoever she was, someone was looking for her. And they were close. He turned back to the glowing woman on his couch. She had a small silver mark behind her ear, like a tattoo. It looked like a star inside a circle. Maybe it was a symbol. Maybe it was a warning. Jaden didn't know. But one thing was clear. She wasn't human. And now, his quiet life was over. Jaden hides a fugitive, without knowing her truth. Jaden didn't sleep that night. How could he? A glowing alien woman was lying on his couch, and strange drones had scanned his house from the sky. The storm had passed, but something colder remained in the air. Jaden sat in a chair nearby, watching her sleep, a cup of cold coffee in his hand. His heart still beat too fast. He kept asking himself the same question over and over again. What have I gotten into? The woman's skin no longer glowed, but there was still something otherworldly about her. Her silver hair shimmered even in the dark, and her breathing was so calm it didn't feel natural. Jaden didn't even know if she was breathing air like a human. The couch creaked. She moved. Jaden leaned forward. Her eyes opened slowly. Violet. Deep. Lost. She sat up too quickly and winced, grabbing her side. "Hey, take it easy," Jaden said gently. "You're safe. For now." She looked around the room, confused. "Where am I?" "My house," Jaden replied. "You crashed behind it." The woman blinked and touched her head. "I remember. Running. Falling. The wedding." Jaden raised an eyebrow. "Wedding?" She looked down at her torn white gown. Her face twisted with pain, not physical, but emotional. Then she looked at him again. "You didn't tell them I'm here." "I don't even know who they are," Jaden said. "You passed out before you could explain anything." Her shoulders dropped, slightly relieved. "Thank you." Jaden stood. "I'll get you some water." He walked to the kitchen. His hand still shook a little. He wasn't a soldier. He wasn't a hero. He fixed electronics for a living. And now he was hiding a being from another world. He brought the glass to her, and she drank carefully. "What's your name?" he asked. She paused. "Lyra." "Okay, Lyra. I'm Jaden, and I think you should tell me what's going on." She hesitated. "If I tell you, it puts you in danger." "I think I'm already in danger." Lyra looked at him for a long time. Then she nodded. "I was supposed to be married yesterday," she began, "to a man named Varnak, a warlord. The marriage was not for love. It was for power. My family rules a large part of the star systems beyond yours. Varnak wanted to unite our people through marriage. But he is cruel. He destroys, conquers, and takes what he wants. I couldn't let that happen." "So, you ran away," Jaden said slowly. "I stole a small ship during the wedding ceremony. I jumped through a blind portal. No one knew where I would land. I only had moments before they could trace me. And you ended up in my backyard," Jaden said, amazed. Lyra gave a tired smile. "Yes, that's where fate brought me." Jaden sat down, thinking. "So now Varnak is looking for you. He won't stop until he finds me. I embarrassed him, made him look weak in front of the galaxy. He will come himself, if he must." Jaden rubbed his face. "Great." Then he remembered the drones. They already sent something. 3 drones were scanning my house after you passed out. One of them noticed something, but then left. Lyra tensed. "They found a trace. They'll be back, with soldiers. Is there anything we can do?" "I need to mask my energy signature," Lyra said. "But I need time. And materials. Your world doesn't have the same tech I use." Jaden stood up. "Tell me what you need. I build electronics. I've made machines from junk. Maybe I can help." She looked at him, surprised. "You'd help me, even knowing what I am?" Jaden shrugged. "You didn't try to hurt me. And you're clearly running from someone evil. That's enough for me." She smiled, for real this time. "Thank you, Jaden." They began working together the next day. Jaden brought out old computer parts, radio equipment, and power cells. Lyra showed him how to shape energy using thin copper wire and strange blue stones from her belt pouch. Together, they built a small cloaking device that could hide her energy signal, at least for now. While they worked, Jaden asked more questions. "What planet are you from?" "Zephyria," she answered. "A peaceful world, once, but now ruled by fear." "What do people eat there?" "Mostly light-based food. Crystals. Soft roots. Nothing that screams." Jaden laughed. "That's good. I got cereal." They shared simple food and quiet jokes. For a moment, it felt normal. But deep down, they both knew it wasn't. That night, as Lyra rested again, Jaden stepped outside for air. The forest was calm, but the sky was not. Far above, high in Earth's orbit, a massive ship came out of warp. Its engines were quiet, its shape like a black claw stretched across the stars. Inside, Commander Varnak stood at a viewing screen. His red eyes glowed as he looked down at the blue planet below. "I found you, Lyra," he growled, "and you will regret what you did." The alien bride tells her secret. The next morning came slowly, as if the sun was unsure whether to rise. Jaden stood in the kitchen, staring at his reflection in the toaster. He hadn't shaved. He hadn't slept. And for the first time in his life, he was hiding a runaway alien princess in his house. His hands moved without thinking, making tea, cutting bread, checking his old radio equipment again. All night, he'd listened for strange signals. A few came through, in a language he didn't recognize, but one word kept repeating in a low, cold tone. Lyra. In the living room, she was sitting cross-legged on the couch, her silver hair falling gently over her face. Her gown was cleaner now, thanks to the clothes dryer. Jaden had stitched the worst parts. She looked fragile, but there was a quiet strength in her posture, like someone who had made a hard choice and was ready to face the storm it brought. Jaden walked in with a tray of food. "It's just toast and tea. No glowing crystals. Sorry." Lyra looked at the toast with interest. "Is this bread?" He smiled. "Kind of. Cheap human food." She took a bite and blinked. "It's soft." Jaden laughed. "That's the best review I've ever heard." They sat in silence for a while. Not awkward, just quiet. Then Jaden asked, "Lyra, I still don't understand everything. You told me about the wedding, about Varnak. But why would your own people agree to marry you off to someone like him?" Lyra placed the toast down. Her eyes turned serious. "Because fear is stronger than tradition, stronger than family." She took a breath, as if pulling painful memories from deep inside. "I was born into the royal family of Zephyria. My parents were leaders once loved by our people. But times changed. War grew across the galaxies. My mother died in a political bombing. My father was forced to make alliances with violent empires. One of them was Varnak's empire, the Draxian Dominion." Jaden nodded, listening closely. "Varnak came with ships, weapons, and demands. He said he would protect Zephyria from war if I became his bride. A peace bond, they called it. But it wasn't peace. It was surrender." She paused, her voice low now. "I begged my father not to do it. He said there was no choice. He said my sacrifice would save millions. But what kind of peace begins with a cage?" Jaden felt something twist in his chest. "That's not peace. That's blackmail." She nodded slowly. "The wedding was set. I was fitted with ceremonial armor, shiny, beautiful, heavy, a chain in disguise. On the morning of the wedding, I smiled for the cameras. I bowed before the council. Then, while the temple bells rang, I ran." She reached into the folds of her dress and pulled out a small glowing disc, the size of a coin. She held it between two fingers. "This is a dimensional shard. I stole it from the portal room. It allowed me to open one blind gate. No one knew where it would lead. It could have thrown me into a sun or the heart of a volcano. But I had no choice. I activated it." Jaden stared at the coin. "And you landed here, on Earth." "Yes, weak, but alive. I was lucky." Jaden leaned forward. "You were also brave. That wasn't just running away. That was choosing your freedom." Lyra looked down at the coin, then tucked it away. "Varnak will not forgive me. Not just because I left, but because I made him look weak. His entire image is built on control. If people see that even a bride can defy him, others might follow." Jaden stood and walked to the window. The woods outside looked normal, peaceful. But somewhere beyond them, maybe even above them, Varnak was searching. "Lyra," he said, "we need a plan." She nodded. "We must assume he will come to Earth himself. His pride demands it." "And when he comes?" Jaden asked. She looked at him calmly. "I fight, or I die." Jaden turned. "Or we figure something smarter." Lyra tilted her head. "You still wish to help me?" I already did, he said. No turning back now. She looked at him, her expression softening. You are different than most I've met, even among my own kind. I'm just a guide with a weird life now. No, she said. You're kind. Jaden felt his face grow warm. He quickly looked at the floor. Then the lights flickered. They both froze. Jaden ran to the back room and turned on his radio scanner. Static. Then a crackle. A voice, deep and mechanical, came through. Royal signal detected. Planetary coordinates locked. Prepare for arrival. Jaden's eyes widened. They're coming. Lyra stood, her violet eyes glowing slightly. Then we prepare. Bounty hunters knock on Jaden's door. Jaden had never felt fear like this before. Not the sharp, sudden kind, but the slow, creeping kind that settles in your bones and won't leave. After the radio message, he and Lyra had moved quickly. They packed a small bag with tools, energy cells, and the cloaking device they'd built together. Lyra insisted they couldn't run. She needed to stay close to the house, where the terrain gave her an advantage. Jaden knew the forest. He knew where to hide. But none of that helped when the knock came. It was early morning. Mist curled along the ground, and birds were just beginning to sing. Jaden was in the kitchen when someone tapped on the front door. 3 times, slow and hard. He froze. Lyra stepped silently into the hallway. She didn't speak. She didn't have to. Jaden walked to the door and opened it just a crack. 2 men stood outside. Both wore dark gray suits and mirrored sunglasses. Their expressions were blank, too calm for strangers in the woods. One held a black device shaped like a tuning fork, which buzzed faintly in his hand. "Good morning," the taller one said. "We're with the Atmospheric Research Council. There's been a satellite malfunction in this area. We're checking for interference." Jaden faked a confused smile. "Satellite. Nothing to worry about," the man said smoothly. "Just routine checks. Mind if we step inside?" Jaden's mind screamed no. He opened the door wider and leaned against the frame. "I haven't seen anything strange, and I'd rather not let anyone in right now. Got a sick dog inside. Might bite." The 2 men looked at each other as if calculating something. The taller one spoke again, this time slower. "We have reason to believe something not of this world is here. If you're hiding it, that would make you a traitor to your own kind." Jaden's heart skipped. That wasn't the voice of a government scientist. That was a threat. He stepped back and closed the door gently. "No idea what you're talking about," he said through the wood. "Have a nice day." He turned and whispered, "Lyra, go out the back. Now." She was already gone. Jaden grabbed the small EMP blaster they'd made together and ran through the kitchen. He opened the back door and slipped outside. The fog was thicker now, and he moved quickly through the trees, heart racing. He reached the old shed and waited. If Lyra followed the plan, she'd meet him there. 5 seconds later, she appeared from the bushes, moving like wind. "They are not human," she whispered. "No kidding," Jaden said. "You recognize them. They're bounty hunters from Varnak's empire. They use skin suits, fake human faces, but their scent is wrong. Too clean. No soul." Jaden blinked. "That's poetic and creepy." A sound cut through the trees, a loud humming, like a machine waking up. Jaden peeked through the trees. The bounty hunters were scanning the house with a black orb floating above them. It pulsed with red light. One of them pointed at the roof. "They found a trace," Lyra said. "They'll burn the house down if they must." "We can't let them," Jaden said. She looked at him. "You don't have to stay. You didn't ask for this." Jaden swallowed hard. "You didn't ask for it either. And I'm not letting those things take you." Lyra nodded once, deeply. "Then let's finish this." They activated the cloaking device, just a weak pulse now, and crept through the trees. Jaden used an old hunter's path that circled the back of the house. He stepped carefully, watching for sensors. When they were close, Lyra whispered something in her own language. The leaves around her shimmered for a second, then stilled. The ground under her feet made no sound now. She moved like shadow. Jaden reached into his bag and pulled out the EMP blaster. He had modified it the night before, hoping he'd never need it. But now he aimed it at the orb. He fired. A flash of blue light burst out. The orb cracked and fell to the ground, lifeless. The hunters turned, too slow. Lyra stepped forward and raised her hand. A small white flame flickered in her palm. She threw it like a dart. It hit the nearest hunter and exploded in a pulse of light. The man screamed, but not like a human. His skin cracked. Underneath was dark silver flesh and black wires. His eyes turned red as he roared in a language Jaden didn't understand. The second hunter charged at Jaden. Jaden dove behind a tree and fired again. The blaster hit the hunter's leg, and sparks flew out. The thing stumbled, but didn't stop. Then Lyra appeared between them. She raised both hands, and her body glowed brighter than ever. Her eyes burned violet. Her voice was like thunder. "You will not take me back." She pushed her hands forward, and the ground itself shook. The hunter flew backward and slammed into a tree with a cracking sound. Jaden stood frozen. "Lyra, what was that?" She turned slowly to him. Her glow faded a little. Her face was pale. "I didn't know I could still do that," she whispered. "It's part of the ancient bond, the Zephyrian core. I thought I had lost it." Jaden helped her stand. "Well, I'm glad you didn't." They moved quickly. The two hunters were unconscious, but not for long. Jaden took the black orb and a small device from one of their belts. "We need to study these," he said. "Might help us stop the others." Lyra nodded. "Varnak will know I fought back. He'll come himself." Jaden looked up at the sky, which was now clearing. "Then let him come. The alien warlord arrives on Earth." The wind changed. Jaden noticed it first. He was in the garage, inspecting the black orb he had taken from the bounty hunters. One moment, the air was normal, quiet, fresh, full of birdsong. The next moment, everything stopped. The birds, the insects, the breeze, even the leaves on the trees stood still, as if the world had paused to take a breath. Then a low, deep rumble echoed through the forest. Jaden dropped the orb. He ran outside, heart thudding. Lyra was already standing at the edge of the woods, staring at the sky. Her silver hair blew gently, though the trees behind her remained still. He followed her gaze upward, and froze. Something massive was descending through the clouds. It wasn't like the small bounty hunter ship or the sleek drones from before. This was a warship, shaped like a jagged crown, floating without wings. Its body shimmered with dark metal, carved with glowing red lines. It was quiet. Too quiet for something so big. Jaden whispered, "What is that?" Lyra's voice was flat. "That is his ship. Varnak has arrived." The name alone chilled the air. Jaden stepped back. "He brought a warship to Earth. Isn't that too loud for a guy who wants to keep things secret?" "He doesn't care anymore," Lyra said. "He's not hiding. He's making a statement." The ship slowed as it reached the clearing beyond Jaden's house. Trees bent under its gravity. Birds fled from the area. Lights blinked along the ship's hull like alien eyes opening for the first time. And then it stopped, floating silently just above the ground. A hatch opened. A ramp descended. And from the shadows, he stepped out. Varnak. He was tall, nearly 7 feet, and built like a soldier carved from stone. His armor was made of dark plates that shifted and moved with him like living things. His face was part flesh, part machine, with deep red eyes that glowed like embers. His hands crackled with black energy. He walked with purpose, slowly, as if every step claimed the ground beneath him. Jaden couldn't breathe. Lyra didn't move. Varnak's voice rolled through the air like thunder. "Lyra of Zephyria, You have run far, but the stars are mine to command. And now, so are you." Jaden stepped in front of Lyra. His voice shook, but he stood tall. "She's not going anywhere with you." Varnak looked at Jaden like he was a smudge on glass. "And what are you, human?" "Her guard dog." Jaden didn't move. "I'm her friend." Varnak laughed, a cold, metallic sound. "Then you will die with her." Before Jaden could react, Varnak raised his hand. A bolt of black lightning shot toward him, but it stopped, frozen in midair. Lyra stood with one hand raised. Her eyes were glowing white now, brighter than ever. Her entire body shimmered with power. "You will not touch him," she said. "Not again. Not ever." Varnak lowered his hand slowly, surprised. "You still hold the core. Impossible. You left the throne. You broke the bond." "I didn't break it," she said. "I just found a new one." Jaden blinked. "Wait. What does that mean?" Lyra didn't answer. Instead, she stepped forward, her feet hovering slightly off the ground. Varnak looked angry now. "You would fight me? After everything I've done for your people?" "You did nothing for them," she said. "You ruled by fear. You used my family, my name, my blood." She raised both hands. The forest around them began to glow. Flowers bloomed out of season. Branches grew faster. The air shimmered with energy. Jaden looked around in awe. "What's happening?" "She's awakening the Zephyrian core," a voice said behind him. Jaden turned. A new figure had arrived. An alien with soft gray skin, dressed in long robes. He held a staff with a crystal that pulsed gently. "I am Torin," the figure said, "a guardian of the Zephyrian royal line. I followed her trail." Jaden blinked. "Are you here to help?" Torin nodded. "Yes, but only she can defeat him." Lyra floated higher now. Her hands moved in circles, forming a symbol in the air. It looked like a glowing tree with stars hanging from its branches. Varnak roared and charged at her. Lightning flew from his fists. Earth cracked beneath his feet. But Lyra held her ground. Energy flowed from her like wind. She pushed her palms forward. And Varnak was thrown back, crashing into his own ship. The ground shook. Smoke filled the clearing. Jaden shielded his eyes. When it cleared, Varnak was on 180, his armor cracked, his eyes burning with hate. "This is not over," he spat. Lyra floated down slowly, landing softly beside Jaden. "It is for me." She held up her hand. From the forest behind them, hundreds of roots and vines sprang up and wrapped around Varnak's ship. The glowing red lines on its hull dimmed, and the engines went quiet. Torin stepped forward, placing his staff on the ground. "He is bound. The earth has claimed him." Jaden let out a shaky breath. You won." Lyra looked at him, smiling faintly. "No, we won." Jaden and Lyra fight for freedom. The forest was silent again. Not because of fear, but because peace had returned. Varnak's warship sat frozen beneath a web of roots and vines, wrapped so tightly it couldn't lift even a finger. His weapons, once feared across galaxies, were now quiet. His glowing red armor flickered dimly under the vines, like a dying firefly in a glass jar. Jaden stood at the edge of the clearing, staring at the ship. His heart was still racing. His hands were dirty, scratched, and bruised. He had never been in a fight like this, never faced an enemy not just of strength, but of legend. But he had stood his ground. And now Lyra stood beside him, not hiding, not running, rising. Her silver hair floated gently in the breeze. Her gown was torn, but she looked royal in a way no crown could ever offer. The power from before, the glowing energy from the Zephyrian core, still shimmered softly in her eyes. Torin, the guardian, approached them, staff in hand. "You have done what many thought impossible," he said, bowing. "You have broken the bond of fear, and you have awakened the core not by blood, but by will." Lyra looked at Jaden. I didn't do it alone. Torin nodded. And that is why you succeeded. Jaden sat on a rock, wiping sweat from his face. So, what now? Is this over? Torin's eyes were thoughtful. For Varnak, yes. He will be judged by the High Council of Aurealis. They have long waited for proof of his crimes. Today, you gave it to them. Jaden exhaled deeply. Lyra stepped closer. But there is still a question. She turned to Jaden. I came here to escape a prison. I found freedom. I found something I didn't believe could exist anymore. Someone who stood with me without asking for anything. Who didn't want a throne or power. Just truth. Jaden looked up at her. I didn't do much. She smiled. You did everything. Torin spoke again. Lyra, the council will ask you to return to Zephyria. With Varnak gone, your people will need guidance. They will want you to take the throne. Jaden stood, quietly. She turned to Torin. And if I refuse? You are free now. No chains, no duty unless you choose it. Jaden looked down. If you go, they'll need you. You could change their world. Lyra looked at him gently. And what if I want to stay in this one? Jaden blinked. You mean Earth? I have seen what love looks like. Not the forced kind. Not a crown on a finger. Real love. In quiet choices, in late-night tea. In standing between me and danger when you had no reason to. Jaden looked away, a little overwhelmed. I never thought I'd fall for someone who glows in the dark. She laughed softly. And I never thought I'd fall for someone who smells like engine oil and burnt toast. He chuckled. We're a good match then. Torin looked at them, smiling faintly. I will speak with the council, he said. If you remain, Lyra, they may send others to ask you to return. But they cannot make you. Lyra looked toward the horizon. Let them try. I will not hide anymore. Suddenly, a new sound filled the sky. Jaden tensed. More bounty hunters. But Lyra shook her head. No, this sound is human. Several helicopters appeared over the tree line. Black, fast, marked with international symbols. They hovered near the clearing, and voices came through loudspeakers. Unidentified craft. This is Earth Defense Command. You are surrounded. Torin raised his staff calmly. It begins. Jaden looked at Lyra. What should we do? Lyra stepped forward and held up her hands. I will speak with them. The truth, nothing more. Jaden followed her, heart pounding. The helicopters lowered. Soldiers in hazmat suits appeared, cautious but not hostile. One man stepped forward, holding a radio. He looked at Lyra. Are you the pilot of that ship? I am Lyra of Zephyria, she said, her voice steady. I came to your world by accident, but I stayed by choice. The man looked confused. You're saying you're alien. Jaden stepped beside her. She's also a guest, and a hero. The man listened. Behind him, others recorded everything. Lyra continued. I have no wish to harm your world. I only wish to live freely. But I know this day has changed everything. I offer my voice, my knowledge, my story, to your leaders, your scientists, your people. I will not hide. The man nodded slowly. We'll take you to a secure location to speak with the UN Special Council. Jaden stiffened. She's not a prisoner. She won't be, the man promised. But the world has questions now. So do we. Lyra looked at Jaden. Will you come with me? He didn't hesitate. Anywhere. 6 weeks later, the world had changed. News channels around the globe showed footage of Lyra's ship, of her face, of vines wrapped around an alien warlord. Scientists confirmed her DNA was non-human. Governments met daily. Some feared her, others wanted to protect her. Most were simply amazed. But Lyra stayed calm. She told her story. She offered peaceful knowledge about the stars, medicine, energy, and how her people sang trees to life. She never asked for power, only understanding. Jaden stayed by her side. Eventually, Earth welcomed her. 1 year later, a small house stood near the edge of the forest. Simple, quiet, full of warmth. Flowers bloomed too fast in the garden. A homemade antenna reached into the sky. Jaden sat on the porch, a cup of tea in his hands. Lyra stepped out, her silver hair now shorter, her gown replaced by jeans and a soft sweater. She sat beside him. "The stars are quiet tonight," she said. "Good," Jaden smiled. "Let's keep it that way." She leaned her head on his shoulder. And for the first time, in a long, long time, the galaxy felt safe. She chooses Earth over a throne. The invitation came on a beam of starlight. It was sent through an interdimensional gateway opened just for her, written in flowing golden script across a translucent disk, carried not by soldiers or ships, but by petals of light, guided by wind no human could see. Jaden held it in his hands, blinking at the way it hummed softly in his palms. "Is it real?" he asked. Lyra stood in the doorway of their forest home, watching the trees sway. "It is." The disc read, "To Princess Lyra of Zephyria, now that the tyrant has fallen, your people wish for your return. The throne awaits." For a long time, she said nothing. The birds chirped, the wind moved softly. The earth felt alive. Jaden looked up from the disc. "You always said you never wanted a crown. But they want you now, the right way. Not as a prize, not as a symbol, as a leader." Lyra nodded slowly. "Yes, they offer me what I was once denied. Choice." She sat beside him on the porch. "And you, Jaden, what would you choose if you were me?" Jaden smiled, trying to hide the knot in his chest. "I'd choose what I loved most." Lyra turned to him. "And if that love was you?" He looked away. "Then I'd be the selfish one." She reached for his hand. "No, you would be the reason I choose." That night, Lyra didn't sleep. She walked through the woods barefoot, the moonlight catching on her silver hair. The trees whispered to her in soft rustles. She placed her palm on the bark of an ancient oak, and it glowed faintly in return. Zephyria was calling. But so was this world. This small blue planet with its noise and chaos and heart, with its broken beauty and its people who, despite everything, still hoped, still helped, still loved. She remembered Jaden fixing his old radio with duct tape and raw stubbornness. She remembered the taste of toast, the smell of morning coffee, the way he looked at her like she wasn't an alien, but something known, something real. She sat on the grass and looked up at the stars. "Do I go home?" she whispered to the sky. Or had she already found it? 3 days later, the silver platform hovered over the lake behind their home. Torin, the guardian, had returned with a gentle smile. "The council waits," he said. "The gate will remain open for 1 hour. After that, we must seal it. We dare not leave a bridge this large unguarded." Lyra nodded. She walked with Jaden to the edge of the platform. Neither of them spoke for a long time. The lake was still. The stars reflected perfectly on the surface. Torin stepped back, allowing space. Jaden finally broke the silence. "If you go, I won't stop you." "I know. But if you stay—" He stopped. Lyra placed a finger on his lips. "If I stay, I want no thrones, no palaces, no royal title. I want mornings with you. I want wind and books and toast. I want to learn how to fix radios and grow tomatoes." Jaden smiled, tears stinging his eyes. "You'd really trade a planet for this?" She touched his chest. "You are my world now." She turned to Torin. "Tell them I will not return. Not now. Let the people lead themselves. Let peace come from the ground up, not from another throne." Torin bowed deeply. "As you wish, Lyra of Earth." He stepped onto the platform, tapped the crystal staff, and the disc shimmered closed. The gateway flickered once, and was gone. Silence returned. Jaden turned to her. You sure? Lyra leaned her head on his shoulder. Completely. 2 years later, the world knew her name now. Lyra had become a global symbol, not just of alien life, but of cooperation, peace, and possibility. Children studied her in schools. Poets wrote about her eyes. Politicians tried, and failed, to imitate her grace. But Lyra stayed away from the noise. She and Jaden bought a small piece of land in the mountains, near a lake where no signal towers reached. They built their home with their own hands. Solar panels lined the roof. Wind chimes made of old drone parts danced in the breeze. Jaden still fixed electronics. Lyra taught him how to grow trees from seeds with a single hum. They built a lab together, part Cypherian, part human. It ran on light and silence. They called it the Garden of Bridges, a place for two worlds to meet and grow something new. One morning, Jaden stepped outside with 2 cups of tea. He found Lyra watching the sunrise, her hands resting on her belly. She looked at him and smiled. There are 2 heartbeats now. Jaden froze. Wait, you mean? She nodded. He dropped both cups. Lyra laughed, really laughed, and Jaden pulled her into his arms, his heart full. 5 years later, a small child with glowing violet eyes chased butterflies across a field. A robot shaped like a dog followed him, wagging its metal tail. From the porch, Jaden watched. His beard was a little longer now, his smile deeper. Lyra sat beside him, her fingers wrapped around his. Still think I should have taken the throne, she teased. Jaden looked at the child, at the sky, at her. I think you built one instead. She leaned her head on his shoulder, and the stars above blinked gently, as if they too were smiling.